After years of playing HeroQuest, what is it that I would change about the game? And as you know from probably my other videos, I'm a huge fan of HeroQuest. I've been playing it with the whole family for years, and I kind of think of it as the ideal family fantasy game. Nonetheless, there are some elements of it that I would change and I think should be revised, or could be revised, especially in light of some modern-day evolutions in gaming. And one of the things that people are probably going to want to talk about in that area straight away is the roll and move mechanic, that the heroes roll 2d6, red dice, and then are allowed to move up to that number of squares. And yes, in kind of more modern gaming styles, probably the heroes would also have just a move statistic, but actually that's not going to be one of the things that I'm talking about here, because actually I don't mind the roll and move mechanic for the heroes, because it does give some worry or concern that you're not going to be able to run away from the monsters, because the monsters have static move numbers, which is good. It keeps Zargon from having to roll all the dice, but then the heroes move according to 2d6, and if you're trying to escape a monster, or you're trying to get someplace or get to someplace, you may or may not be able to do it. And of course, some people won't like that. They just want to know how many spaces the hero can move. But rolling the dice allows you to kind of factor in the other potential elements of the dungeon, especially when you're trying to get away or run from monsters. Because there's always a problem in a variety of different games if you're trying to do a chase scene and everybody's move statistics are exactly known quantities and you can like double that if you run or something like that. Then you know that there's no way that this group or that group is going to catch up with this group because they're just faster. And so chases can be a problem. So HeroQuest at least preserves that element with the 2d6 roll, that if you're trying to get away from the monsters in the dungeon, you may or may not be able to. That's not something that you can just count on. So yes, I can definitely see the argument, and I understand the argument for adjusting the hero's move mechanic, but that wouldn't be exactly on my top list of things. So the first thing I would change, though, is the magic system. And I talked about the magic system when I talked about playing effective heroes, when I talked about the wizard. And I think that the magic system as it exists in the game right now promotes the wizard being too conservative. Because once the wizard casts a spell, the spell is gone forever. The wizard can't use that spell again. And so I feel like it promotes the wizard being too conservative and not casting spells. And what you actually want the wizard to do during the game on his turn is to cast spells, because he's the wizard. So I would definitely want to change that up so the wizard feels more comfortable, like whenever the turn comes around, casting spells. And that probably means that we need to move to some type of mana or power point system, that's some kind of known quantity that the wizard has, and then it costs so many power points or points worth of mana in order to cast a spell. And even though that's a known quantity and the wizard's only got so many different points of mana, even if it's just 1-to-1, now maybe you don't want it to be 1-to-1, 1 point for casting one spell, because there could be more powerful spells. Like, do you really want the wizard casting Genie every single turn? Well, probably not, as an attack spell. You wouldn't want that. And so right now they are kind of managing the number of times that happens in the game, because, it's just a one card, one spell, and then it's gone kind of thing. But if we move to some type of system where there were mana points or magic points, the wizard still has something that the player has to manage, and that's the number of the spell points that he or she has got. So run out of those and you're not casting any more spells, just like when you run out of cards, you're not casting any more spells. But I feel like this would encourage the wizard to be more free in the casting of the spells, because he or she doesn't have to worry about any particular spell being gone. I can cast it, spend however many points worth of spell points or mana points or whatever it is to cast that spell, and it's still available to me so long as I have mana points. So they're trying to conserve the mana points throughout the game, but if it comes out that he needs to cast 2 fireball spells or something like that, then that would be fine. Now probably you do want to not go 1 spell, 1 point, because the difference in something like Fire of Wrath and Ball of Flame and the Genie, so that would all have to be worked out. But I do think the game could be improved by adjusting the spell casting system in this way. And of course, you don't want the wizard to have too many different spells, so you wouldn't necessarily increase the number of spells that we've got, because I don't want there to be a situation where the wizard player is in constant analysis paralysis because the wizard has so many options. At least as the wizard is casting spells now, it's constraining the number of options that the player has to decide on any given turn. So you don't want like 20 or 25 spells and the wizard's like, well, now which one of these do I use? Because that's too much. HeroQuest is supposed to be a fast-paced game and go ahead and play and keep things moving. And so you don't want to introduce too many spells into the game. I also think there should be an adjustment to the combat dice, because I do feel that the combat dice right now are a bit too random, so I would kind of move a little bit away from the randomness. I still want to have randomness in the game, but I would move away from it a little bit. For instance, the Barbarian has 3 combat dice, right? And that makes him potentially very powerful, but also very random still, because yes, he can definitely hit with 3 skulls, but he can also walk up and roll a 0 as well. So the game is very dicey in that regard, and of course also from the perspective of the monsters as well. The game is very dicey in that regard, which does make it light, which does make it fun, which does make it much more gamist, and of course that's how I started off playing these kinds of games anyway, so I'm very familiar and comfortable with it. Very gamey, very fun, dice-slinging kind of thing, but I would want to reduce the randomness. And so I think I would do that by trying to come up with some system where you've got some amount of dice that you roll for a weapon attack, but then also there's some kind of static modifier, potentially, depending on that particular character's skill, which might grant them automatic skulls, for instance. So maybe the Barbarian is rolling 2 dice, plus 1 automatic skull whenever he attacks. That could be the case. But you'd have to play with that with all the different characters. Maybe the wizard is the most random, so you only got 1 attack, and it is a die, and it's a roll. Maybe that's fine. And then you scale to the Barbarian being 2 dice plus 1, or even 3 dice plus 1. I don't know, that may make him too powerful. But you see what I'm talking about, putting in that scale in there. So, I tried to do that with this game right here, which is Enchantress. This is one of the games that my brother and I developed, and this was our game when we did like a skirmish game of wizards casting spells. It was wizardly combat, and so we were obviously highly influenced, both of us, by HeroQuest as a kid because we played it all the time, and so we wanted to have some type of active defense system in Enchantress, so you attack by rolling dice and then defend by rolling dice. And of course, we moved to a D8 system with the dice. You're rolling D8s instead of D6s. But then, I don't know if you can tell here, but then, for instance, like Meteor Swarm, when the sorcerer is casting this spell, it is a 2d8 plus 1 spell. So that was 2 casting dice, which are kind of like the combat dice, plus 1 automatic success, as it were, or 1 automatic hit. Inferno right here is 3D, 3 of these casting dice plus 2. And then each target also defends, and of course we had different power sources for different wizards, and so you cross-reference the power sources of the wizards, and that tells you how good they were at defending against those different power sources. So I've experimented with creating my own system like that for the Enchantress game, and I think it worked very well. I'm very happy with Enchantress in general, and that spellcasting system with the kind of HeroQuest-like attack and defense, except for not as random, using D8s and bonuses involved there, I think was really good. So I really like that. I think I would incorporate that into HeroQuest in some type of revision. Now, of course, that does mean that if you're doing an automatic skull, then in some cases, if the Barbarian can inflict an automatic skull, does that mean that he can automatically kill a goblin if the goblin doesn't defend? Well, it would. Does that work? Is that good? We would have to see. There would be a lot of playing that would have to be done, and we might require other adjustments as well. But then again, maybe that is acceptable if you're trying to reduce the randomness of the game. It's just a goblin. If your mightiest warrior, the Barbarian, steps up to the goblin, does it make sense that if he spends his turn, his action, that he could at least inflict the skull on the goblin, and then the goblin would have to defend? Maybe it does. I would also want to give Zargon a more active role in the game. Right now, Zargon is very passive because the game puts so much power in the hands of the heroes to control the pace of the game by opening doors and taking out monsters and then deciding when to open another door and so forth and so on. Zargon's very reactive during the game. Whatever the heroes have basically let Zargon have. Now, of course, there's the dice element that they might not have been able to kill. Zargon gets to play with. So I would come up with some type of element where Zargon did have a more active role and had things that he could do on his turn that would influence the heroes. And I'm not sure exactly what those are. I have played Descent, and I think there were elements of that in Descent. Now, and sometimes I played it wrong, but I remember when I was trying to play basically the Zargon Dungeon Master Chaos player, like I had cards that I could play against the heroes, so I wasn't always just reactive to what the heroes were doing on my turn. I could also be proactive, and I like that element, so I think I would want to add some type of proactive element to Zargon as well. The other option there is to move to an entirely cooperative game, and I've become very much a fan of cooperative games. Zombicide Black Plague is one of my favorite games, and one of the reasons is because everybody's playing on a side together, and that's fun. And of course, that has been an element of the way that a lot of games like this are going as an element of more modern gaming, and I like that. Now, I do know that there is an app that allows you to control monsters with this new HeroQuest. I have not tried that yet. I want to try it. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe with the app, that takes care of all Zargon, then all of the players at the table can be the heroes and just play together. And I might really like that. I think that might be really great, but I haven't played with the app, so I don't really know what its capabilities are. Maybe that's for another video. But nonetheless, I still think there would need to be some type of more active role that Zargon, whether that's a human being or an app or some other like card-based AI mechanic, can actually do proactively to the heroes.